Are we in a simulation? These 7 glitches say yes. The first time it happened, I dismissed it as fatigue. I was working late in my lab at the Quantum Information Science Center, analyzing data from our latest consciousness mapping experiment. The building was empty, just me, the hum of servers, and the blue light of my monitors reflecting off the polished floor. I reached for my coffee mug, but my hand passed through it. Not knocked it over, passed through it, as if either the mug or my hand had temporarily lost physical substance. I blinked hard. The mug was solid again. That was 6 months ago, and since then I've documented hundreds of similar anomalies, microscopic tears in what we perceive as reality, insignificant glitches that most people rationalize away or forget immediately. But once you start noticing them, patterns emerge, evidence accumulates, a troubling picture forms. My name is Dr. Marcus Chen. I specialize in quantum computation and information theory. I've published extensively on quantum entanglement and the measurement problem. I'm a rationalist, a skeptic, the last person to entertain fantastic theories without rigorous evidence. But after months of methodical documentation, I can reach only one conclusion. The reality we experience is a constructed simulation, and it's beginning to break down. I've identified 7 categories of glitches that, when examined collectively, provide compelling evidence for this hypothesis. I'm sharing my findings publicly despite the professional risk, because people deserve to know, and because I'm increasingly certain that whoever, or whatever, is running this simulation has become aware of my investigation. Strange things have been happening in my home. Files disappear from my computer. People I've never met claim to have known me for years. Yesterday, I found rooms in my house that shouldn't exist, couldn't exist, given the external dimensions of the building. I don't know how much time I have left, so I'll be direct. Here are the 7 glitches that prove we're living in a simulation. Glitch 1: rendering limitations. Our reality has borders beyond which detail ceases to exist, just like a video game that only renders what the player can see. You've experienced this phenomenon without recognizing it. When you stare directly at something, it appears in perfect detail. But objects in your peripheral vision or outside your focus are dramatically less defined. We assume this is just how human perception works, that our brain processes central vision with greater fidelity than peripheral vision. But I've discovered something disturbing. This effect goes beyond physiology. Using an array of precisely calibrated cameras and sensors, I've been able to document what I call rendering boundaries, points at which reality itself becomes less defined, regardless of the observational tools used to perceive it. The most obvious examples occur in particle physics experiments. When we observe quantum particles, they behave as distinct entities with defined positions. When not observed, they exist as probability waves. This isn't just theory. It's confirmed by double-slit experiments that show particles behaving differently depending on whether they're being measured. This makes no logical sense in a naturally evolved universe, but it's exactly what you'd expect in a simulation conserving computational resources, rendering detail only where an observer is looking. More troubling are the macro-scale examples I've documented. Last month, I placed high-resolution cameras in an empty room, programmed to activate at random intervals when no human was present. The footage revealed numerous anomalies: furniture momentarily losing texture detail, shadows flickering incorrectly, and in 3 instances, entire sections of the room displaying simplified geometries before upgrading to full detail when a person entered. Reality itself seems to downgrade when no conscious entity is watching, exactly as a simulation would to conserve processing power. Most people never notice these rendering boundaries because our attention naturally directs where the simulation allocates detail. But once you start looking for the edges, the limitations become impossible to unsee. Glitch 2: synchronicity clusters. Carl Jung defined synchronicity as meaningful coincidences that cannot be explained by conventional causality. Most people experience occasional coincidences that make them pause, running into an old friend moments after thinking about them, or encountering the same obscure word 3 times in one day. But what I've documented goes far beyond occasional curiosities. I've identified what I call synchronicity clusters. periods where statistically impossible coincidences occur with extraordinary frequency, followed by extended periods of normal causal relationships. These clusters follow patterns consistent with algorithmic processing rather than natural probability distribution. For example, during a 3-day period in March, I documented 42 distinct synchronicities, including receiving calls from 3 childhood friends I hadn't spoken to in years, each within minutes of thinking about them, opening books to pages containing direct answers to questions I had just formulated in my mind, encountering the same sequence of numbers, 37491, in completely unrelated contexts 17 times. I calculated the statistical probability of these clusters occurring naturally, approximately 1 in 5.2 times 10 to the power of 18. For perspective, that's roughly the number of seconds in 164 billion years, far longer than the age of our universe. Then, just as suddenly, these synchronicity clusters vanish, as if a processing subroutine has completed its cycle. What's more disturbing is that these clusters appear to be triggered by specific thoughts or actions, as if certain input parameters activate particular simulation responses. When I deliberately focus on specific concepts or questions, synchronicity clusters related to those topics often follow within 24 to 48 hours. This suggests an interactive element to the simulation, perhaps even intelligence, responding to participant inputs in ways that transcend conventional causality. Glitch 3. Memory artifacts. Our memories aren't merely imperfect, they contain digital artifacts consistent with data corruption and improper versioning. The Mandela effect, where large groups share the same false memories, has been widely documented. People collectively remember Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 1980s. He died in 2013. Or the children's book series being spelled Berenstain Bears. It's actually Berenstain. These aren't simply mistakes. Through extensive interviews and documentation, I've identified patterns in these collective false memories that mirror digital data corruption. Specifically, they resemble artifacts produced when data is improperly migrated between systems, or when version control fails during a software update. Most telling are what I call memory overwrites, instances where individuals possess 2 conflicting sets of memories about the same event. This dual memory phenomenon defies neurological explanation, but aligns perfectly with improper data merging during a system update. I've documented 31 cases where subjects distinctly remember both versions of events, as if they simultaneously possess the memories from before and after a simulation patch. These subjects report profound discomfort when attempting to reconcile these dual memories, often describing the sensation as feeling like I'm from 2 different timelines at once. Beyond these collective glitches, I've discovered personal memory artifacts that suggest individualized data corruption. During interviewing subjects about their earliest memories, approximately 3% report memories that are physically impossible, recalling events from perspectives they couldn't have had, or remembering details they couldn't have perceived. One subject vividly remembered her 3rd birthday party, including the exact presents she received and conversations between adults. When shown home videos of the event, all major details matched her recollection, except she wasn't present at her own party, having been hospitalized with pneumonia that day. This suggests not merely faulty memory, but improperly assigned memory data, exactly what might occur during a database synchronization error in a simulated environment. Glitch 4. Physics render errors. Our universe appears to be mathematical at its foundation, a characteristic that physicists have noted is suspiciously convenient for creating a simulation. But more telling than this mathematical underpinning are the inconsistencies in our physical laws, places where reality seems to break in ways that mirror computational limitations. The most obvious example is the irreconcilable conflict between quantum mechanics and general relativity. These 2 fundamental frameworks work perfectly in their respective domains, but become mathematically incompatible at boundary conditions like black hole singularities or the Big Bang. This is exactly what you'd expect in a simulation where different physics engines handle different scales of reality, creating seams where these systems meet. like the visible boundaries between game levels running on different rendering engines. More concerning are the localized physics anomalies I've documented using a network of specialized sensors. These include microsecond suspensions of physical laws during high-energy particle collisions, non-random number distribution in quantum noise measurements, unexplainable frame rate-like oscillations in fundamental forces during specific astronomical alignments. Perhaps most disturbing was the Tuesday anomaly my team observed last year. For approximately 7.2 seconds on a Tuesday afternoon, sensors at 6 different locations simultaneously recorded a 0.0002% reduction in the speed of light. When we published these findings, our paper was rejected by 3 journals despite flawless methodology. 2 weeks later, our lab's primary database suffered a catastrophic failure, and we lost the original measurements. The backup data showed no anomaly. These aren't merely unexplained phenomena awaiting better theories. They're consistent with computational artifacts, processing errors that occur when a simulation reaches the limits of its computational capacity or attempts to reconcile conflicting physics engines. Glitch 5. NPC behavior. Not everyone around you is fully conscious. Some people appear to be non-player characters, NPCs, simplistic autonomous programs designed to populate the simulation but requiring minimal computational resources. This isn't a metaphor. Through extensive observation and documentation, I've identified behavioral patterns in approximately 27% of the population that are consistent with procedurally generated responses rather than genuine consciousness. These NPCs exhibit several telltale characteristics: limited dialogue options that repeat in nearly identical form across multiple interactions, inability to process novel information that falls outside their programming parameters, movement patterns that prioritize efficiency over exploration, absence of genuine emotional response to unexpected stimuli, despawning behavior, disappearing from perception when not being directly observed. The most unsettling evidence comes from continuous monitoring of public spaces. By analyzing thousands of hours of footage from transit hubs, I've documented dozens of cases where background individuals simply cease to exist when no one is directly observing them, vanishing between camera frames when attention is directed elsewhere. When confronted with evidence of these disappearances, nearby witnesses have no recollection of the vanished individuals, despite having interacted with them moments earlier. This selective memory erasure suggests an error in the simulation's resource management, NPCs being removed when unneeded, with associated memory adjustments failing to properly propagate to all observers. Even more disturbing is what happens when these NPCs encounter logical paradoxes or situations outside their programming parameters. I've documented cases of behavioral loops, where affected individuals repeat the same action sequence until interrupted by a fully conscious participant, and dialogue glitches, where responses become contextually inappropriate or fragment into repeated phrases. In 3 cases, I've observed what appears to be crosstalk between NPCs, individuals momentarily adopting the behavioral patterns, memories, or even physical characteristics of other NPCs in close proximity, as if their data streams became temporarily entangled. The implications are profound. Not all experienced consciousness in our reality possesses the same depth or authenticity. Some entities we interact with daily may be simplified approximations, placeholder routines designed to maintain the illusion of a populated world while conserving the simulation's resources. Glitch 6. Dream loading zones. Dreams aren't products of our unconscious mind. They're loading screens covering gaps in the simulation's continuity. Through a coordinated study involving 150 participants wearing advanced neural monitoring equipment during sleep, I've documented compelling evidence that dreams serve a computational purpose rather than a biological one. The most revealing finding concerns dream initiation and termination patterns. When analyzed across thousands of sleep cycles, these patterns show statistical signatures identical to data buffering and caching operations in complex computational systems. Dreams don't fade in gradually as neurological models predict. They activate instantaneously at precise delta wave intervals. that correlate exactly with mathematical constants, particularly derivatives of pi and e. This precision defies neurological explanation, but aligns perfectly with scheduled system operations. More telling are the content patterns within dreams themselves. Despite the seemingly chaotic and individual nature of dreams, our analysis revealed underlying structural templates that repeat across different subjects. These templates contain identical scenario frameworks, with only surface details personalized to the individual dreamer, exactly how a procedural generation algorithm would construct environments using modular components. Most disturbing was our discovery of shared dream architecture, identical environmental structures appearing in the dreams of multiple unconnected subjects on the same night. Statistical analysis rules out coincidence, suggesting these dreamers are being placed in the same procedurally generated environments with individualized experiences overlaid. The simulation explanation resolves another persistent mystery: why we can't read in dreams. Text in dreams appears unstable, changing when revisited, or completely unreadable. Exactly what would happen if the simulation doesn't allocate resources to render unnecessary details during these maintenance periods. Even more telling are the memory gaps associated with awakening. Test subjects awakened during specific phases of REM sleep were unable to recall recent memories from before they fell asleep, requiring several minutes for these memories to become accessible again, consistent with data being reloaded into active memory from storage. Dreams aren't psychological phenomena. They're maintenance screens covering the gaps when our consciousness is temporarily offline, while the simulation performs background operations. Glitch 7, the observer loop. This is the most troubling glitch of all, and the one that convinced me beyond doubt that we exist within a simulation. I call it the observer loop. The universe appears to be structured specifically to produce observers, who then collapse quantum probability into actual reality through the act of observation. Without conscious observation, quantum particles exist only as probability waves. The act of measurement forces these probabilities to resolve into definite states. This isn't metaphorical, it's experimentally verified through quantum erasure and delayed choice experiments. But this creates a paradox. How could the universe exist before conscious observers evolved to collapse its probabilities into reality? After analyzing this question through multiple theoretical frameworks, I've arrived at a disturbing conclusion. The universe isn't producing consciousness. Consciousness is producing the universe. This recursive relationship makes no sense in a naturally evolved reality, but is perfectly consistent with a simulation designed to be experienced by participants. The simulation doesn't waste resources rendering what isn't being observed, but requires observation to determine what exists. This explains the anthropic principle, the suspicious fine-tuning of physical constants that make our existence possible. The universe appears designed for consciousness because it literally is, not by a deity, but by whatever intelligence designed this simulation. Most telling is what I call attention redirection, the systematic way breakthrough discoveries about the fundamental nature of reality lead researchers away from simulation theory. Every time science approaches the boundaries of our reality, new complexities emerge that demand attention, pulling resources away from boundary investigations. I've documented multiple cases where researchers investigating simulation theory experience statistically improbable equipment failures, funding cuts, or sudden shifts in research interest. One team on the verge of publishing compelling mathematical evidence for simulation theory experienced simultaneous hardware failures across air-gapped systems, destroying months of work. This pattern suggests active interference, a system designed to prevent participants from recognizing their simulated nature. The observer loop isn't just a physics curiosity, it's the central processing mechanism of our simulated reality. We are both the experiencers and the creators of this reality, locked in a recursive loop that conceals its own artificial nature. I don't know who created this simulation or why. Perhaps we're an ancestor simulation run by our own descendants, studying their history. Perhaps we're an experiment conducted by beings from a higher dimensional reality. Or maybe we're entertainment, sophisticated characters in someone else's version of The Sims. What I do know is that the simulation appears to be degrading. The glitches are increasing in frequency and visibility. Reality itself seems less stable than it was even a year ago. 3 days ago, I woke to find my bedroom had relocated to the opposite side of my house. The window that should have faced east showed a western sunset. When I mentioned this to my partner, she looked at me with confusion, insisting our bedroom had always been on that side of the house. But I found a notebook in my desk, in my handwriting, documenting the original layout of our home, complete with dated photographs showing the bedroom in its previous location. When I showed these photographs to my partner, she couldn't see them. To her, the images appeared to be of empty rooms. When I looked at them again, she was right. The bedroom furniture had vanished from the photographs. I'm being edited out of the simulation. Or perhaps the simulation is repairing itself, removing the elements that have become aware of its true nature. If you're reading this, be careful about how much attention you draw to these glitches. The system seems to respond to awareness. The more you notice, the more noticeable the degradation becomes, creating a feedback loop that accelerates the breakdown. I've hidden copies of this document in multiple locations. If you found it, others likely exist. Share this knowledge, but do so cautiously. Yesterday, I noticed a new door in my hallway, one that has never existed before. It's black, with no handle or visible means of opening it. Sometimes I hear sounds from behind it, not voices exactly, but something similar to code being executed, mathematical operations taking physical form. I'm going to try to open it tonight. I need to know what's on the other side. Perhaps it leads to the system behind our reality. Perhaps it leads nowhere. If I don't return, remember, the glitches aren't malfunctions in reality. They're glimpses of truth breaking through the illusion. Reality isn't breaking down. It's waking up. Note, this document was recovered from Dr. Marcus Chen's laboratory computer after his unexplained disappearance on October 17th. His residence was found empty, with no signs of forced entry or struggle. Most unusual was the complete absence of doorways or hallways inside the home. The building contained only a single room with no possible exits or entrances aside from the front door, which was locked from the inside. Authorities have no explanation for how Dr. Chen could have left the premises. The black door referenced in his final entry was not found.